everybody, so we're here at BakeDeco today. We're going to show you how to do sourdough. Sourdough is always started with a starter. It's the live yeast cultures for a sourdough bread. It's not the regular yeast that you buy in the store. You have to create this by yourself. So in order to have a good starter for your bread, you always mix equal parts of starter, flour, and water. So let's say we have today here 100 grams of starter. We will put in 100 grams of bread flour and 100 grams of room temperature water. Why am I saying room temperature water? The temperature of the water is really what makes your starter good. So basically, if you have cold water and you put it in, it's going to take that much longer for your starter to grow. So if you want to make bread the same day and you feed your starter in the morning, it's best if you feed it with room temperature water. You could even add a tiny drop of hot water from a kettle, because we only use bottled water to feed your starter. So don't make the water too warm, because hot water can actually kill the starter, but a nice room temperature lukewarm water will feed your starter well, and it will let it grow nicely, so you don't have to wait, let's say 8 to 12 hours to feed your bread. Probably sometimes, if it's a strong healthy starter, this is like a 3-year-old starter, in a matter of 4 or 5 hours, you could probably have your starter doubled. Then you do a flow test, which we will show you later, and that's how you use this starter. This is the type of yeast you use to feed into your sourdough bread. So now we're gonna mix our starter. We're gonna feed it. We're gonna do equal parts of flour, starter, and water. So we have 100 grams of starter, 100 grams of flour, and 100 grams of room temperature water. We're gonna mix this together, and then we're gonna let it rest. We keep it in a nice lukewarm place. We cover it even. That will make it even nicer and warmer so that it will rise faster. It has a lot to do also, what I want to explain is the time of the year. In the winter, especially, it's important to keep it in a nice warm place, because the room temperature also affects how your starter is going to grow. In the summer, a starter grows faster. You don't need that warm water. In the winter, it grows slower, so your water has to be a little warmer. We wrap it up, we keep it in a warmer place, so things happen faster. The most important thing is always to remember the temperature when you're working with sourdough. If it's too hot, you can overproof. If it's too cold, it will just take too long. So we always try to keep an in-between balance. So now we're ready to feed our starter. Okay, so I have 100 grams of starter, 100 grams of flour, and 100 grams of lukewarm water. I'm gonna mix the flour. I'm gonna put in all the flour into my starter. And then I'm gonna put in the water. Then we're gonna mix this. We're gonna mark it so we know how much it grew. When will we be ready to test it, if it's ready to be used in a few hours from now. So my water was about 90 degrees. I always test it. And that was just perfect to make a nice lukewarm starter. So basically it becomes like a sponge. Like a sponge, and that is a nice starter. We're gonna mark this, and then afterwards we're gonna know, in a few hours from now, we're gonna check this, and we're gonna make sure that it is perfectly doubled, and then we do what's called a flow test, so we can make sure that our starter is ready to be used. Okay guys, so we're ready to do our bread. I'm gonna show you how to make a pesto sourdough bread filled with pesto and cheese. But first we just have to create our dough. Adding flavor comes later, and I'll show you soon how we're gonna do that. But how do we know that we're ready to do our sourdough? In the morning I fed a starter. It's about 5 hours later. How do you know that your starter is ready? We will do a flow test. We take a little bit of water, just room temperature water. You go into your starter, and we put a little starter into the water. Watch this float. Now you know that your starter is ripe. If your starter sinks to the bottom, then your starter is not ready to be used yet. So we will measure out 100 grams, 400 grams of water first. So we will do 400 grams of 90-degree water, which I measured out, and I use a laser thermometer to measure the water. Water temperature, like we discussed earlier, is one of the most important parts to your sourdough. Now I will measure how much I need. 100 grams of starter. So we always clear the scale. Make sure it's on 0 before you put in, and we're going to measure out 100 grams of starter. You see how gooey and spongy it is? The stretchier, the spongier, the better your starter is. Also, starter comes with age. The older the starter is, the better it is. This starter you're going to put aside, and then whenever you're ready to do your bread, you put this back in the fridge when you're ready to do another bread, and this you measure and refeed like we had discussed before, and you feed it again. If there's, let's say, 50 grams of starter, you'll do 50 grams of flour, 50 grams of water, and you wait for it again to grow. Every time you want to make bread, you have to refeed your starter to make your bread. Okay, so here we go. We have 400 grams of water and 100 grams of starter. And this we mix it up a little bit, so we break apart our starter into the water, but gently. Okay. Now I have 500 grams of bread flour, and I have 9 grams of pink salt. Now in starter dough you always use sea salt, fine sea salt. I use pink salt. I find that it gives a special taste and flavor to the sourdough. Now I'm going to mix this all by hand. It's a very shaggy dough. It doesn't have to be perfect now. Now you only have to incorporate it well. Okay, so basically you only mix your dough till you get like a little shaggy mess. Everything just has to be incorporated. Okay, and then we're just gonna leave it now to rest. I would say about 45 minutes to an hour. Then we come back and we'll just reincorporate it well to take out all the nuts and the lumps this time. And we'll rest it for about another 30 minutes. Then we can laminate our dough and put in all the flavor. And then I'll show you exactly how we do a coil fold after that. Okay, now that we have our dough incorporated, which I said before, just has to be like a little shaggy mess. You just have to pull it together, don't overdo it. Now that's incorporated, we wait anywhere between 30 minutes to an hour to rest. This is called part of the bulk rest, when the bread has to just rest for like about 2 hours till it's ready to be shaped. So, but first we have to wait for the first rest. Especially if you want to put in any type of filling, that's when we can just start to laminate the dough and fill it with whatever we want, and then we do the coil folds, and afterwards comes shape. But now we're just going to put it to rest for another about 45 minutes in a warm place, and after that we'll continue and I'll show you exactly how we do filled bread, like if you want to put in any flavor into it. Okay guys, if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to the BakeDeco channel down below. And don't forget to come back and watch us next week for part 2 of this video.